Hey everybody, Graham here from therecordingrevolution.com. Got a product review for you today. It's Trigger from Slate Digital. And Trigger is a drum sample replacing, sample enhancing plugin for audio unit, VST, RTAS, you name it. So what it can do is take your drum tracks that sound bad and make them sound good. That's the idea. But it's really more powerful than that. What it can do is not only replace transient heavy things like drum tracks with pre-recorded samples, that either the ones that are included or your own if you have your favorite samples, but it can blend samples alongside your live recorded tracks at various degrees however you like. So it gives you a ton of control. It's not a strict rudimentary swap out a kick drum for a sampled kick drum. It can be that if you want, but it doesn't have to be. And what's beautiful is you can use this not just in studio tracks, but what I want to show you today is how I'm using it on some live recorded drums. This was recorded live at a church service where we didn't have a whole lot of time to mic up the kit and listen to it and record back and make sure that it was the way we wanted. We had to throw it up there. We had a lot of stage bleed, a small stage, so not a lot of space, not a lot of separation. Not your ideal situation for miking up a drum kit, especially if you want to make a studio recording or a mix after the fact. So what I want to show you is how I'm going to tweak these drums, and I'll show you Trigger in the process. Really, really simple plugin. So here we are. I have a kick, snare, two tom tracks, and a mono overhead track. All right, so only 5 mics, really simple setup. Take a listen to what these drum tracks sound completely by themselves. Got overhead here, kick drum, close snare, and a couple of tom mics. All right, really thin, really lacking. But the transients are there. You can take a look at the hits right here. They're all over the place as we're zoomed in on. Kicks, snares, not a whole lot of toms in this passage, but mono overhead. Now what Trigger can do is you can put it on only the tracks you want. So let's start with the kick drum. I'm going to insert it here. And again, this is a plugin that'll work on any DAW of your choice. I'm in Pro Tools today. And when you look at the plugin, it looks crazier than it really is. And they give you a lot of control, probably more than most people will need to start out with. At its very core, what I want to do is solo my kick drum track. And in your settings window here, there's a few things you can have set. Right now, I'm going to make sure I browse to where my samples are. And I'm going to use the included samples that come with Trigger. Now, this is just the basic $99 Trigger EX. And so you buy that, you get the plugin. You also get a bunch of his Slate samples, kick drums, snare drums, even toms. Okay, so normally once you've got Trigger set to find where your samples are, and again, you can use your own samples, it will always pop up here in the left. So I'm on a kick drum track, and that's what I want to enhance or replace. So I'm going to double click kicks, and that's going to give me some subfolders of different types of kicks. Let's just start with the first one, kick 05. And so what we have here are 4 different samples. And on the right here, you have up to 6 different slots. What that means is that you can layer in up to 6 different drum samples to replace or play alongside the audio coming through this track. So you can blend a lot of samples. What that means for you is a lot of unique sound possibilities. Let's keep it simple. Let's try Kick 5 Z1. If you find one you're interested in, double click it. And then the slot that used to say empty has now filled with Kick 5 Z1. Let's get out of the settings menu. When I press play, you're going to see the WAV files pop up here, and we'll take a listen to what happens. All right. It's seeing my kick drums that are actually recorded on the track coming through, and then it's set by default to 100% replace with Kick 5 Z1. It's just a sample. Really quickly, what I'm going to do then is this pair of white bars here, they can be narrow or wide. And that determines sort of the range, how detailed do you want to get. If you have a really transient heavy thing like a kick drum, that's a really big wave, take a look at this. This is filling up almost the whole screen. I don't need to have it that tight. I can loosen it up. That way it's not double triggering a kick drum hit. Cleaned it up a little bit, see? Still some double kind of flangey hits there. Here's a re-trigger knob here, which you can say don't re-trigger the drums if they fall anywhere less than 69 milliseconds. Let's try that. Nice and clean, right? And then finally, you have a sensitivity knob. What trigger does is it sees the transients coming through, in this case a kick drum, and it doesn't just see it and replace it with a sample at a flat designated volume. It tries to follow the velocity or the volume that it's inputted, that it's fed. So if my drummer kind of lightly taps the kick drum, it will try to produce the sample at that volume or that velocity, you know, to sort of mimic how it was played, a lot like MIDI. And this knob controls how sensitive that is. So let's dial it all the way down. All right, so it's not sensitive at all. And then dial it all the way up. You hear how it's getting kind of quieter on those quieter hits. So that gives you the play to keep some of that human feel, so it's not a complete replaced sample that's the same volume 100%. Here's another thing to consider. This is by default completely replacing my kick drum. Up here at the top you see it says mix 100%. This means that in the mix, the sample that we've chosen, kick 571, or any samples we have here, will be 100% of the mix. If you simply click with your mouse and dial down, you can change that percentage. If you go to 0%, then there's no sample, there's just my real drum. Okay? Let's put it somewhere in the middle. So with 50% engaged, now I've got what's coming out of my kick drum track over on the left, and which actually is going into my mix, is half of the raw audio and a half of the sample. So that's a perfect blend. That's equivalent to having a sample on a separate track and you blend the volumes to be equal, basically. So what this gives you is complete customization of how much do you blend in the sample. Okay, now keep this in mind. You can swap out different samples. If you didn't like that kick drum sound, we could try something else. I'm going to back up here. You know, you can go to Old Zepp kick, Old Zeppelin, get that going. Right? Very room sounding. If you're going for that style, you could replace it there. Go back to kick, excuse me, let's try kick 10. A little bit of a room sound in there. Bring this down a bit. So you go from that to this. And by blending in the sample and mixing a lot of it in, you can hear that it minimizes obviously the volume of the raw track. So that minimizes in a live setting, especially the overhead bleed, the other track bleed. Is almost like having an expander or a gate on your kick drum. It reduces noise. So let's stick with that for now, and let's listen to that with the overhead. That's what it was before. All right. right, still needs some work, obviously, because we need to bring in the close mics. Let's listen to the snare drum only. I'm just going to grab another copy of Trigger and put it on the snare drum. And look at snares, and we'll look at snare 5. Double click that. Let's take a listen. All right, that's fine. Let's try snare 11. It's got some meat to it. Mix it in a bit. You just try to dial in the detail and the sensitivity. See, it captures all the detail of his snare rolls and fills. This is what we had before. All right, now keep in mind I'm still working with a mono overhead, so you're not going to get the big wide sound. That's just the way it was mic'd. So far, we've sort of replaced or enhanced the kick and the snare. And what I'm going to do simply here on the overhead is sort of take a little bit of an EQ and dial out some stuff. High pass. You can even do the same thing with toms, right? So let's find an area where we're hitting some toms here. Here's another song. Let's see. This tom hit right here. Let's try to replace that with Trigger as well. We'll grab Other, we'll grab Trigger. Double click on toms. Let's try tom 4. Let's copy the same thing over to this tom track, and in this case I'm just going to choose a different tom sample, tom 1. Let's go up to a tom heavy part of this song here. I see that high tom's a little too high for me, so I'm just going to choose a different sample. Let's try that one. Blend it in a little bit. And just pop these down here. You take a listen to what we're doing here so far. Take off Trigger. Much better. And then especially in a live setting, if you just add a little bit of a reverb, I'm going to grab a stereo track here, especially since I've got a mono overhead, which is killing me sometimes. It's great live because live you're doing mono most of the time anyway. But grab just, your standard reverb in your DAW, like a small plate or something. I always kind of dial back the high frequencies here. And then what you can do is simply, send or bus some of your thing to verb. Bring that in a bit. And I'm going to just copy this over to, snare. Get a little bit of space. And if you're to take it all off, we'll take off all the trigger and the reverb here in a second. You can hear that tom is being triggered. So I'll dial up the detail so it doesn't catch that. So you have this versus there you go. That's trigger being used to take recorded tracks live in a live setting and really, really enhance them. Now, I kind of went extreme. I'm using a lot of the samples here. And what you're going to have to do is sort of find where you want the blend of the real audio and the sample. And keep in mind, I didn't do any EQing or compressing to the actual kick and the snare. That's a great way to go, is to actually try to get the kick and the snare to sound the best it can. Use a lot of subtractive EQ to cut out those frequencies that are just driving you crazy in the mix. Cut out some of the bleed so that what's on your track is an even better sound. Then blend in a little bit of a sample to give you more fatness, to give you more sonic options if you only had a couple of mics, if the mic wasn't placed properly. And then what you're getting is the live performance with better sounding drums or enhanced drums. And that can take your live recording to the next level. If all the other tracks sound fine, but your drums, you just had so much bleed, you didn't have enough time to really mic place the way you wanted, because so much of good drums comes with proper mic technique. And in a lot of live settings, especially in church settings, if you're in a worship band like I am, we have a lot of volunteers setting up, tearing down. You don't have a lot of experienced people miking up the kit week in and week out. So you have to rely on something that can give you a little bit of an edge, get you back to the control you would like to have if you had full control over the mix. So that's Trigger in a nutshell. There's a lot more to the program. You can layer different samples. You could put a room drum sample on a snare as well as the close sample. You can adjust the volume of the samples, the attack and sustain of the actual sample. I didn't dive too detailed into it. I just wanted to show you how quick and easy it is to enhance your live drum tracks and, of course, your studio drum tracks with Trigger from Slate Digital. I give it a big thumbs up because it's a very helpful utility to have around. You can get a little crazy with it, but the more you get experienced with it, the more you find it has a place in most studios. Hope this helps. Again, this is Graham at therecordingrevolution.com. I hope to see you in another video. Take care.